Hello, everybody. So this must be like a pinnacle of my career because I get to speak in front of so many talented people and a lot of people that I look up to. So thank you for being here. I hope you're enjoying Dev.Play. I hope you're having fun. My name is Gabriel, and I'm from Amber. And I'm going to talk to you guys about where good ideas come from and a bit about creativity. And this is a lot about giving stuff back. So just to give you a preface of the thinking behind this, I had the opportunity to work for some big companies and meet some very cool people that are in the audience, and they're at this conference. And I got to learn a lot, and I think that this is the kind of stuff that not everybody has the chance to do. So a lot of it, for me, is giving back. And because, like, sharing is caring. So this is the way myself and Amber would like to give something back to you, the guys, the community. It's a talk about ideation. It's a talk about where good gaming ideas come from. So, you want to do this? Let's do this. So before I start, there's one thing that I would want to mention, and that is that what I'm going to be telling you about today is based on the work of several cool people. This guy you probably know, Bogdan Dinka. So he's been part of Ubisoft. He now works with Amber. And when he joined Amber, he was delegated to create an ideation pipeline. And a lot of the things that I will be telling you about are learnings from Bogdan. So Bogdan started generating ideas for Amber because Amber in itself is a service company. So we're trying to pivot towards original IPs. Like Ian was telling you earlier on that it's very important to have your own IP to build something. And we know this. It's something that we're trying to do. And we're kind of in the middle of it, so we're still learning. We just put out our first game, our own IP. It's called Link Twin. It's in soft launch and it's coming out in October. So some of the stuff that you'll find here are learnings from developing original IPs or from our attempts of developing original IPs. Now, Bogdan's work is based on a program that was built by Stanford University for the Amsterdam School of Creative Leadership, which is called Think, which is, if I were to put this in short, this is a very disciplined way of thinking. Like if I were to think about what the program is all about, is teaching you how to think. It's mental crutches. So also the work is based on Nick Skillin, I cannot pronounce his name, is a really smart guy from the UK, and he's been investigating where creativity comes from. So let's see, how many people in the audience consider themselves creative? Can you please put your hands up? Okay, good. Quite a few. How many of you are not creative? That's not bad. And how many of you aspire to be creative? Okay. So I have some good news. Everybody can be creative. We think of artists and we think of designers and we think of musicians, and they tell you stories of, I don't know, so I got this really good idea. It was after a night of drinking or meeting women or whatnot. But truth be told, there's a whole process behind it that they don't usually rationalize. Now, who is actually creative is, everybody can be creative, but who actually is creative? This is a broader subject because the creatives are people who do it over and over again. So I was telling you guys that it's a thought process, and it's about discipline and repeating. So creative people are actually the people who go through a process over and over and over again, and they train their mind to work in a certain way. So creativity. Creativity is basically producing a new idea that brings value to somebody. The more people that you bring value to, And value can be anything. Can be entertainment, can be scientific value, can be anything. For the purpose of this presentation, we'll be talking about games. Duh. But but ideally, so entertainment is value, right? So this is why entertainment is about creativity. So I would go even further to say, since we're all building products, games are products, and since we're all building products that bring extra value to the people around us, I would say that creativity is problem solving. Like, if you narrow it down to the very basic of it, creativity is problem solving. This is what I will be telling you about. So about good ideas, because everything starts usually with idea, or like this is the way we think about it. We think that we start from one idea. It's a bit more complicated than that. But about generating good ideas, you have to understand that the human mind, and this is something that I'm kind of understanding right now, is the human mind is very, very lazy, right? So the human brain has tricked us into believing that the human brain is the most cool thing that ever existed on the face of the earth. So when we have to generate ideas, the first thing that we turn to are memories. And it's stuff that we've learned, stuff that we know about, stuff that we have been reading, stuff that we know works from our past experience. But you can probably see the problem with this. It's no longer up to date. So if you try even harder, you're gonna go into what works right now. Like what's happening, like for us, it's what's happening on the market right now. What works? Is it Angry Birds? Is it Clash Royale? Is it whatever? But it's mimetics, right? So we try to imitate somebody. And if we try even harder, like if we put a lot of brain power into it, that's where the special ideas come from. But I can already like start to see a pattern here. Like, have you seen a lot of retro games that are being remade over and over again and sold the same product over and over again? This is it. And then people who imitate other people, angry bunnies. But if you put a lot of thought and effort into it, you come up with a gem. It's something very special, right? What's a gem? Look, it's debatable, but it's good. It's crazy good. So if we're to discuss about games as creativity, there's two things that we need to talk about. The first one is ideation, which is ideally, which is the process that you put behind coming up with the idea, and the execution in itself, which is just as important or even more important. But for this talk, I want to focus on ideation. I want to focus on these two things, sensing and visioning. And these are two words that you will be seeing a lot in the next slides, because number one, you need to have a sense of the market. You need to understand what the market needs, and then you have to be able to envision it. So sensing is, like some people can put it in, it's that gut feeling. I know that this will work. Why? Well, I don't know, but I can feel it. I can sense it. My experience tells me that I can do it. And then visioning is explaining it. Like there was a guy who said, if you cannot explain it, then it's not simple and it's not finished. And this is what visioning is about. And this is the focus of this talk. So I'm going to leave you with this quote for a while. Max Bill, in case you don't know, Max Bill is the guy who invented typeface, right? So he's the guy who invented fonts, typefacing. So if everybody's done with reading this, the sum of it is that there's always a method. There's always a way, an educated way of doing it. Like even in modern art. Modern art is strange. Like you get to splatter stuff on a canvas and you call it art. But there's a whole method behind it. So let's go a bit more into the method of ideation. And I'm going to tell you a bit about sensing. And this is basically where it starts. And you have, like, if you're starting an original IP, I'm gonna go back for a bit. So if you're starting an original IP, you probably need an idea. And this is where you start. You put together your team, and you start sensing stuff. And sensing is consuming. Like if I were to put this really simple, it's that point at which you start to understand the problem and you start to consume a lot of references about it. You and your team start learning about the problem and you look into how you can rationally understand the problem that you're looking at. You're not coming up with the idea, you're understanding what your idea has to be. So you need to have a problem. You need to know what you're building. You need to be aligned to a vision. And this is where you build your ideation team. And keep in mind this is problem solving, so get the right people involved. Not everybody can do problem solving. There's some people who can execute really good, but they're not problem solvers. And then be prepared to understand what brings you guys together. There's a bunch of questions that you need to answer to. I will not go into this because we don't have a lot of time. But what I can tell you is, by the end of it, you should have a joint mission. And from now on, everything that you and your team will be doing, you will be building together. Okay, step number 2. So step number 2 is to start consuming and exploring the data. And this is where you start dispelling myths. What you have to understand is that there's public data, then there's myths, and there's understanding that are superficial about the market that you're exploring. But you have to go beyond that. So you're going to start doing that by creating a fact pack, which is essentially, for the sake of doing things easy, you're probably going to use Pinterest, or you're probably going to use Google Drive, but you can use a board to do it. And this is where you gather your references. References for the product that you're looking to build. And once you have the fact pack, and when I say a fact pack, be prepared to do like a lot of research. Give yourselves 2-3 days to do this, because it's a lot. So when you have the fact pack, you're going to start seeing insights, and you're going to start seeing patterns. And I'm going to drink some water because my voice is going down. You gotta quit smoking. Right, so you have a fact pack, and you also have a drink of water. It's good. So the second step to this, and mind you, this is a step-by-step process, so don't rush into it, enjoy it. The second step of this is go out there and play everything that has something to do with the product that you're trying to build or the game that you're trying to build. And this is your way of developing empathy for the user. So it might be easier for the guys that build games out of passion. Hey, I want to build the next Baldur's Gate. Hey, I want to build the next big RPG, because like you remember Interplay? They used to say it's built by gamers for gamers. This is what they were saying. We know everything. We know how our users think. We know how our users act. We know what they like. We know what they hate. And this is very, very important. Now, it's a bit more difficult for the people that, like for us, when we were doing Cinderella, doing this, like imagine a 12 guys team playing girl games. I mean, our testosterone was like this low. Yes, growing man boobs. Also losing your voice. So, but at the end of this, you will understand who your audience is, and you will start behaving like them. Or you'll be seeing their patterns, and you'll be adding this to your fact pack. And the fact pack is something that you will be using throughout your exploration over and over and over again. Also, you'll be identifying pain points. So pain points are the places that people don't like in the experience, or that they would rather not do. And it's not something that you necessarily want to avoid, but it's something that you can capitalize on. Like freemium does this. So they use emotion, they spike you up on emotion, and then they make you pay for it, or they spike you up on frustration. That's a pain point. And then you pay for it to move forward. That's a pain point. That's a clever use of a pain point. And last but not least, you will be documenting everything in a mind map. And I remember, how many of the guys here use mind maps? We should be using more mind maps. So there's actually a link in the presentation that I'm going to share with you guys about mind mapping. I found out about mind mapping from Dan, who's in the audience right now. Thank you, Dan. So it was 7 years ago, and we're like, so I go up to him, and he had this branch all over his screen, and it was huge. And it was word connected to another word, branching out in 3 words. And I was like, what is this? And he goes like, this is mind mapping, it's crazy, it's good. And the amazing thing about mind mapping, which is essentially a brain, it's a thinking technique, is that it helps you think in depth and make connections. So you'll be using a lot of this. And then the next step, and you're probably right now in the middle of it. By the way, if you guys are making notes right now, I'm going to share this presentation with you. So enjoy it, because there's notes and there's links in the presentation. Yes, insights. So the next thing that you want to understand is, who are your stakeholders? And when you're making a game, the number one person that you're thinking about is the gamer, right? The user. But then there's other people involved. There's a community involved. There's a publisher involved. There's Apple if you're doing it on mobile. There's Google Play. There's so on. And there's strange dynamics in regards to how actually the gaming ecosystem works. So you want to think about these. Like, when we were doing Cinderella, one of the things that we understood by looking at the dynamics of the App Store was that if we don't put out updates by the least of 4 weeks, so if we were to delay something by more than 4 weeks, our game would go down the charts, because people forget about it. So this is one insight. And there's a bunch of insights that you can understand. And obviously document everything in a mind map, because this will be very good for you. And finally, and this is, I'm almost done with understanding who your user is start connecting the dots. So once you have your insights and you have your clues and you have everything that you want to know about your user, you want to start making connections and think about how everything that you've learned until now sticks together. And once you have this, you're going to start to understand what is the question that you need to ask yourself. Because until now, you have been learning everything about the user, the ecosystem, the market, expectations, and so on. But you haven't been doing anything towards the game. So it's time to start doing something about the game. And it all culminates with sleeping. And this is something that I did not talk until now, but it's something that you should do over and over and over again. Like, take at least one night between each step. It's called idea incubation, and I'm going to divert for a bit and give you guys some insight about, and this was new to me as well, but the brain works in different ways. So when you're focusing and when you're gathering information and you're understanding things about and you're growing laterally, you're in a beta state. Your mind is in a beta state, and it's about focus. But then you also need to sleep, and your brain goes into alpha state when it starts making connection. And this is when things start making sense. Like, you know how people come to you and say, look, I had this really great idea this morning. What was it? Well, I forgot to write it down, but it was really good. This is what happens, right? So your brain starts making connections between all the things that you have been learning. Now, also a very fun parallel to this is for all the students, and we've all been students at some point, You ever noticed how if you learn something right in the morning before the exam, you don't remember anything 1 week later? This is because incubation hasn't happened in your brain. So get a lot of sleep. Sleep is important for you. It also helps with having good skin. Right. So ideally, by this point, you know everything that there is to know about who you're making the game for. And you're going to start visioning. And at this point, you have the team, everybody's aligned, you start looking at clusters about everything that you have been learning, and you're preparing yourself for big breakthroughs. This is the really juicy stuff. This is the part that everybody has been waiting for. So yes, you're building the idea for your game. And you're going to start not by having an idea, but by having a question. Is this like is this getting to you guys like, is he going to tell us when the idea comes? Is this getting to you guys? Am I building suspense right now? So the big question, and this is when, because you know everything, you can now ask yourself the correct questions about what the game that you're trying to make is. And one of the creative questions, one of the more famous creative questions in the history of not game development, but idea development was, how can we write in space? And there were two people, like in the 60s, when the Russians and the Americans were putting people into space, they had a big problem. You couldn't write in space with a pen because there's no gravity. That sucks. So both the US and the Russians asked themselves almost the same question. The Americans had this question, which was, how can we develop a pen that can write in space in zero gravity? And it was about $10 million expensive to actually make a pen that had its own pump. You would do stuff, you could write in space. Now the Russians came up with a pencil. Could be, but the Russians, man, they're crazy. Also, it's very cheap to do that, right? So it did not cost them millions. And yes, or maybe yes, that, or maybe they did not ask the right question. Who knows, right? Who knows? But the point I'm trying to make with this is, when you have the question, even though you're starting to come up with a solution, refrain yourself from finding a solution. Like, keep the question as broad as possible. And here's a formula that you can use, which is, how can we blah, blah, blah. This is your game for this type of gamer who, and here are your insights, and has this need. So this is very abstract, so I'm going to give you guys like some of the examples that we have been asking ourselves. So the first time that we asked ourselves this question was, how can you emphasize user experience in a community-driven mobile game? So there's a lot in this question, like user experience, community-driven mobile game. But then you said, wait, let's make this even better. And how can we create a compelling community-driven game for mobile users? And at first we said addictive, but we were like, wait a minute. There has to be some ethics behind this. So we said compelling. It's not addictive, it's compelling. And what we eventually came up with was, how can we give any mobile gamer an engaging role inside a virtual community? Right? This is the question that you ask yourself. And then you can come up with the game. It can be an RPG, it can be an adventure, it can be Quake, it can be whatever. But it has to answer this question. It's a very smart way of doing games. So now that you have the question, you can go back to the fact pack, and you know the question that you're trying to answer. Start looking for insights. Start connecting dots. Start looking at previous experiences. Come right in. And brainstorm, because this is the point. Like, Back to the fact pack is an exercise where you're going to start generating ideas for the question that you have asked. And then you're going to ask yourself, okay, so I have these solutions, but let's try another lens. And another lens is, what would mother do? This is a very interesting lens. But it's essentially switch roles. So you're always thinking like a game developer, switch roles for a bit. Think as, well, it doesn't have to be your mother. Maybe your mother doesn't even play games. Mine does, but who knows? So ask yourself, what would Donald Trump do? Ask yourself, like, how would Donald Trump make a game? So, like, in our term, and this is a story from Bogdan, but when he was doing ideation, they were building a narrative game. So one of the first questions that came to mind was, what would R.R. Martin do? And he has this way of killing everybody, so how does that change your game? And you're gonna come up with all sorts of crazy, wacky ideas, and share them with your team, discuss it, and when you have one that makes you laugh, you're onto something. So right now you have your ideas, by this time you have generated a bunch of ideas, it's time to start finding the good one. So how many, we get like 20 per, like 30 per session. So you get like 30 ideas, maybe you'll get 5, maybe you'll get 10, who knows, right? But you're gonna have a lot. So you need to start sorting them. And this is the final exercise that you're gonna be doing, which is create a matrix and ask yourself, what kind of idea will be successful and what kind of idea is just crap? And don't throw those ideas away. The ideas that you say that are crap, don't throw them away. Put your best idea in the middle and let it feed off the other ideas. It's because everything goes together, right? So this is the way of building, like you have your idea, this is the way you'll be feeding your idea from other ideas. So the very end of it is, you have your idea, do the elevator pitch. How many of you people have done an elevator pitch? Not bad, not bad, not bad. So the elevator pitch comes from the very frequent happening of meeting an executive in the elevator, and he asks you, so what are you up to? What is your project? And you can pitch it, and you can sell it to him. And maybe he's going to turn it into a game, who knows? But you have to do it in 60 seconds, because the elevator is going to go up to the 5th floor, and he's going to be out. And if you haven't done an impression in those 60 seconds, he's not going to do it. So ideally, you should be able to contract your idea in a meaningful short narrative. Get all the important stuff in there. Keep it short and to the point. And this is the vision of your game. So there's some things, like we made some mistakes so you don't have to. Because this is the second coming of this process, and it's probably going to change over and over again. But here's something that we have been learning. 4 is a party, 5 is a crowd. Don't make your team bigger than 4. Because you're going to get all sorts of ideas, you're going to get all sorts of questions, and it just doesn't work. And this is organic. It depends a lot on who you're working with, because chemistry matters. But you guys remember how I was telling you earlier on, get the right people. Not everybody is creative. And it's not that they're not able to be creative. It's that they're not doing it over and over again. So keep it to a minimum and keep chemistry working. Now, another important thing is that even though some white people can jump, you need to use the right people. And this is a very... I see, like, Dan is smiling over there, because this is something that some artists don't like, but there's a difference between artists and creative people. And this is a discussion that I have with some of my graphic design friends, because it's one thing to execute on a vision, but it's a totally different thing to come up with an idea. So remember how I was telling you that it's creative is problem solving? Not everybody can do problem solving. the final thing about this is criticism. So a very important takeaway, and we've killed, so I think that we've done over 40 to 50 ideas until now. We've prototyped 3, and we took 10 to a concept phase. But the big takeaway from this one is your idea will grow. And don't rush to explain it to people, because during inception, your idea is very, very fragile, and you're going to build on it, and you're going to add stuff, and it might not sound cool. In the beginning, it might not be so cool. So number 1, refrain from criticism. Number 2, refrain from putting an idea out there too fast, because people will not get it. Not in the initial stages. And last but not least, don't rush it. Like, take at least 2 to 3 weeks to do this. Because you remember how I was telling you about incubation? Like, you need to sleep. It's as simple as that. You need to sleep, you need to eat, and you need to consume and make the correct connections. And now you have it, and you're just going to have to build it. And you're going to have yourself an awesome game. Thank you so much. Now, I'm already taking over Dan's presentation, so thank you, Dan, for this. And I think we have like 5 minutes for questions. You guys have questions? If not, I'm going to go have a smoke. No questions? Great. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of Dev.Play, and have great ideas.